You guys see this? So Alyssa Thomas elbowed Lexi Hull in the face. Again, she was just shooting a layup. Of all, like, I will never be one to defend Alyssa Thomas's intent, but she went for a layup and did elbow Lexi Hull in the face. There was no intent in this. She wasn't looking at Lexi Hull. She is either the, like, has the greatest body control known.
One elbow, one laugh. And just like that, 17,000 people decided they were done with Alyssa Thomas. Here's what actually happened. Alyssa Thomas goes up for a routine layup. Lexi Hull contests late. The elbow comes up naturally as part of the shooting motion, catches Hull clean in the face and breaks her nose. Blood everywhere. Medical staff rushing over. Hull on the ground in obvious pain. And Alyssa Thomas looks over at her and laughs. That's it, that's the moment. Not the elbow, not the broken nose. The laugh. That single reaction in the span of maybe 2 seconds is what turned an entire arena against her. And not just any arena, her own home court in Phoenix, where she was supposed to be the home team. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Drop it in the comments right now, because I genuinely want to know where people land on this. Was the laugh just a nervous reaction, or did it tell us everything we need to know about Alyssa Thomas as a player and as a person? Because here's what's wild, depending on how you answer that question, this entire story changes. And by the end of this video, you might...
But again, like, throughout the game, you saw a thing calling freaking Lexi, she called Lexi a crybaby a bunch of times after getting her nose busted as well. That time she's pointing to the crowd. But, like, she got booed by her home fans. Like, that is bad. That is bad, getting booed by your home fans. To be fair,
might completely change your mind on where you stand. Because this isn't just about one play, one laugh, or one broken nose. What happened in Phoenix that night exposed something massive about where the WNBA is right now, who has the power, who's losing it, and why the league will never look the same again. Let's get into it. The play itself was unremarkable, right up until it wasn't. Thomas driving baseline, going up for the layup, completely focused on the rim. Hull comes in late on the contest, her face ending up exactly where Thomas's elbow was swinging through as part of the natural shooting motion. One frame Thomas is shooting a layup, the next frame Hull is on the ground, and the building goes completely silent. Watch the replay in slow motion and be honest with yourself. There's no way that was intentional. Thomas is already mid-motion when Hull arrives. She's not looking at Hull, she's not adjusting her arm toward her. The contact happens because Hull's face was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Thomas's elbow was already committed to the shooting motion. That's basketball. That's the kind of collision that happens multiple times every single game across every level of the sport. If Thomas had just kept moving, if she'd shown any form of acknowledgement, even something as small as a glance that said, "That looked rough," the story ends there. Accidental contact. Hull gets medical attention. Game moves on. Nobody writes a headline about it. But that's not what happened. Thomas looked over at Hull on the ground, took in the scene of a teammate-level opponent bleeding on the court and laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a "oh man, that looked terrible, uncomfortable" laugh. A laugh that, when you watch the footage, reads as genuine amusement. And then, because apparently that wasn't enough, she started calling Hull a crybaby. Multiple times, pointing to the crowd, performing for the building like she'd done something worth celebrating. The crowd heard it.
Oh no, went to UConn, you fucking dumbasses. Olivia Nelson-Ododa got booed by UConn fans even though she went to UConn. And yeah, it's one of these things where she got booed on her home court. And
the cameras caught it. And 17,000 people made a collective decision about who Alyssa Thomas was in that moment. Here's what's psychologically interesting about crowd dynamics at sporting events. Fans can forgive a lot. Hard fouls, aggressive play, trash talk, heated moments in the middle of a competitive game. These things are all part of the theater of professional sports, and most people who show up to watch understand that. What fans cannot forgive, and what triggers an almost primal response, is celebrating someone else's pain. The moment a player visibly enjoys the fact that an opponent is hurt, something flips in the collective consciousness of a crowd. You stop being a competitor, and you start being a villain. And once that switch flips, everything else you do for the rest of that game gets filtered through that new lens. Every touch of the ball, every possession, every time your name appears on the scoreboard, The crowd is going to remind you of who they think you are. Thomas gave them exactly the ammunition they needed, and these weren't fans who needed much convincing. Let's back up and talk about how this game even ended up with 17,000 fans in attendance, because that number is the key to understanding everything else that happened. The Phoenix Mercury average around 9,000 fans per home game. That's a solid number for the WNBA. It's respectable. It's enough to create a decent atmosphere and keep the lights on. But it's not a number that suggests deep, passionate fan loyalty. It's the kind of attendance that comes from casual fans who live...
That's the crazy thing, is that I wonder what the attendance for this game was. I wonder what the attendance for this game compared to their normal one was. Because I know the Fever haven't been doing good attendance-wise this year. They haven't done well at all. So there was 17,000 people at the game to watch the Fever without Caitlin Clark. And the Mercury had 9,000. Holy shit. Oh, it's the one time. It's the only time they were playing the Fever in Phoenix. Because they advertised it as, this is the one game. They advertised it as the only time you're going to get to see Caitlin Clark. I shit you not. They advertised the game as that. And they didn't even get to see her.
Nearby and want something to do on a weeknight, not from people who have built their lives around supporting the team. When the Mercury announced they were hosting the Indiana Fever, the marketing machine went to work immediately. And the pitch was irresistible on paper. One game, one night, the only time Caitlin Clark comes to Phoenix this season. Buy your tickets now because this doesn't happen again. That's not a sports advertisement, that's urgency marketing. That's the language of limited time offers and sold out concerts. And it worked. Tickets sold, the building filled up. 17,000 people in seats. Nearly double the Mercury's normal draw, which by any measure represents a marketing success story. Except for one thing, Caitlin Clark didn't play. She was injured. That happens in sports. Players get hurt. Games go on without them. Any fan who's followed the sport for longer than 5 minutes understands that roster availability is uncertain and that sometimes the player you bought tickets to see doesn't take the floor. It's disappointing, it's frustrating, but it's part of the deal. Here's what's not part of the deal and what makes this situation genuinely remarkable. Those 17,000 people showed up anyway. Think about that for a moment. They were sold tickets specifically marketed around Clark's presence. They found out she wasn't playing, and the vast majority of them still walked through the doors, found their seats, and created one of the most electric atmospheres the Mercury had seen.
Cunningham basically got booed for 40 minutes here. Like, Sophie pretty much got booed for the entirety of the game. From start to finish, they were booing Sophie Cunningham. And that's one of those things where I'm like, this is kind of a mad one. Seeing a player getting booed the entire time. And then suddenly they dislike Alyssa Thomas. Like, even the fans that were there cheering for the Fever were booing Sophie. But they were all booing Alyssa Thomas. Like, that is one thing I would hate as a player. And I couldn't be happier that it's happening to her.
In years, not for the Mercury. Not because they suddenly became Phoenix fans overnight. But because the Indiana Fever, as a team, as an identity, as a movement, had become compelling enough to travel for even without their biggest draw on the floor. That doesn't happen in professional sports. When LeBron sits out a road game, attendance dips. When Patrick Mahomes misses a game, neutral fans who bought tickets for the spectacle stay home. Star-driven attendance works in both directions, which means when the star isn't there, the draw evaporates. That's the conventional wisdom. The Fever are operating outside conventional wisdom now. And the people who showed up weren't passive observers quietly filling seats. They were loud, coordinated, and ready. They were Fever fans who traveled from Indiana, Fever fans who lived in Arizona, and had never had a reason to go to a Mercury game before Clark made the Fever interesting. And Fever fans who simply wanted to be part of something that felt bigger than a regular season WNBA game. When you mix those people together and give them a genuine reason to get emotionally invested, which Alyssa Thomas provided within the first quarter, you don't get a crowd, you get a force. The Mercury marketing team thought they were selling a Caitlin Clark spectacle.
I'm absolutely delighted Alyssa Thomas got booed, if I'm being real. And yeah, the Indiana Fever, when it comes down to it, are like, they are still a big team. When it comes down to it, they're still a big team in the WNBA. They are still a team that people are going to go to see. People are still going to see Caitlin Clark if she shows up once. If she shows up once a year, and you're going to go and see her. Every single time you're going to go and see her if she goes and shows up to your team once every single year. The problem...
What they accidentally did was hand-deliver 17,000 hostile fans to their home court and give them a villain to direct that energy toward. Before we get to the full scope of what happened with Thomas, we need to talk about Sophie Cunningham, because her experience that night tells a slightly different but equally revealing story. Cunningham has her own history with the Fever and with Clark specifically. She's made her presence known in previous matchups through physical play that some people view as competitive and others view as something less defensible. She's not a quiet player. She engages with the crowd, plays with visible emotion, and has never shied away from the confrontational side of the game. She's exactly the kind of player that opposing fans love to target. And target her they did. From the opening tip to the final buzzer, every time Cunningham touched the ball, the arena erupted. Every free throw attempt became a ceremony of noise and distraction. Every defensive possession came with a soundtrack of boos that followed her up and down the court. 40 minutes, more or less continuous, with almost no let-up. It was one of the more sustained crowd reactions you'll see at any sporting event at any level. But here's where it gets interesting, because the Cunningham boos and the Thomas boos were different animals entirely. When Cunningham got booed, it was passionate, but it was also somewhat performative. The crowd was enjoying the game of getting under her skin. They were booing the way fans boo a player they love to hate, with energy and volume, but also with a kind of entertainment quality to it. The building was alive during those moments. You could feel people having fun with it. When the focus shifted to Thomas...
But, yeah, look, I'm delighted. I'm absolutely delighted. And chat, do you guys think that, that the Alyssa Thomas getting booed is, you know, too far, or whatever the hell they would say in WNBA circles? Or do you guys think, like, obviously that this is sports, and it's what happens when you, as a local team has not managed to get enough of a fan base that you open it up and it's all away fans? Don't boo her at sports. Thank you. I'm just looking to get to see if there's still some sane people. There are still some sane people in the world. And
the tone changed completely. The Fever fans who were booing Thomas weren't entertaining themselves. They were expressing something more like genuine disapproval. And the detail that matters most in the whole story is this one. The Mercury fans who were there, those 9,000 or so home supporters in a building of 17,000, didn't push back. They didn't try to drown out the boos with cheers. They didn't rally around their player when the crowd turned on her. They just let it happen. When your own fans go silent while opposing supporters destroy your player's reputation in your building, that's the clearest possible signal that something has gone deeply wrong. It means the people who should be on your side have looked at the situation and quietly decided you don't deserve defending. Not that they hate you, necessarily. Just that they can't bring themselves to excuse what they saw. That's a different kind of judgment than getting booed. Boos can be written off as emotion, as reactionary crowd behavior, as people getting caught up in the moment. Silence from your own fans is deliberate. It's a choice, and it's devastating in a way that booing never quite is. Cunningham got the boos because she'd built a reputation as someone who plays physically with Clark. Thomas got the silence from her own supporters because she laughed at a woman with a broken nose and then called her soft for bleeding. Those aren't the same thing, and the crowd understood the difference even if they expressed it in different ways. The Alyssa Thomas situation doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's the loudest moment of a pattern that's been building around the Connecticut Sun all season, and in some ways it's been building for years.
I just don't think in general that AT ever deserves the benefit of the doubt in any of these scenarios, and I just don't personally, I just don't want to do that ever. I'll never give AT the benefit of the doubt in any of these scenarios. The only time is that she clearly did not intentionally hit Lexi Hall. There's no not giving the benefit of the doubt. Lexi Hall came in late as Alyssa Thomas was shooting a layup. There's no, like, Lexi fouled Alyssa Thomas. Other than that, she was probably,
years. Let's talk about Olivia Nelson-Ododa, because her story adds a layer to this that most people glossed over. Nelson-Ododa played at UConn. 4 years, she was a Husky. She was part of the program that Connecticut fans treat as a religion. When you play at UConn, you earn a kind of lifetime loyalty from that fan base that should, in theory, insulate you from criticism. UConn fans don't turn on their own, except they did. At one of Connecticut's home games, Nelson-Ododa was booed by what was unmistakably a crowd heavily populated with UConn alumni and supporters. These are people who watched her play in college, people who cheered for her during her career in stores, and they showed up to a WNBA game and booed her anyway. The instinct is to rationalize it. Maybe those weren't really UConn fans. Maybe the crowd got confused. Maybe there was something specific that set people off in that particular game. But none of those explanations really hold up when you look at the broader context. The Sun have developed a reputation for a style of play that's wearing thin even with their most loyal supporters. There's a version of physical, aggressive basketball that everyone respects. You see it in the WNBA, in the NBA, across the sport. Players who play hard, who aren't afraid of contact, who compete with an edge that makes them difficult to guard and difficult to beat. That version of physical play is celebrated because it's fundamentally about winning through competitive excellence. The physicality serves the basketball. Somewhere along the way, the Sun's identity shifted. The physicality started to feel less like a tool for winning and more like an end in itself. The aggressive play that used to generate respect started generating questions. Were they playing hard or were they playing dirty? Were they being tough or were they crossing lines that sportsmanship is supposed to protect? That question doesn't have a clean answer, and reasonable people can disagree about specific plays in specific moments. What you can't argue with is the result. When your own alumni fan base is booing your players, when the people who grew up watching and loving your program are actively rooting against you at home games, something has gone wrong with the culture. Not just one player's behavior, not just one bad game, but something fundamental about the way the team presents itself to the public. The Sun spent years building an identity around being the team that nobody wanted to play against. Tough, physical, uncompromising. And for a long time, that identity was an asset. It created fear. It created respect. It created a certain kind of playoff credibility that soft teams never develop. But fear and respect are only assets as long as people believe you've earned them through genuine excellence. The moment people start wondering if the toughness is really just an excuse for crossing lines, the entire foundation starts to crack. And once it starts cracking, you get moments like Phoenix. You get booed in your own arena while your own fans sit on their hands. You get Nelson-Ododa getting destroyed by the people who were supposed to love her forever. The Sun have a cultural problem that a winning streak won't fix, because this isn't about their record. It's about their reputation. And reputation, once damaged at this level, takes years to rebuild. Here's where this gets more nuanced, because intent actually matters, just not in the way most people are using it in this conversation. The elbow was not intentional. Let's just put that on the table and leave it there. Slow the footage down, watch Thomas's body mechanics, watch where her eyes are, watch Hull's timing on the contest. Hull comes in late. Thomas is already committed to the shooting motion. The elbow rises naturally as part of the layup. Hull's face arrives at the exact wrong moment. You cannot make that argument in reverse. There's no version of this where Thomas had the awareness, the angle, and the split-second decision-making to intentionally direct her elbow at Hull's face during a live basketball play. That's not how human biomechanics work, and that's not how basketball works. So the elbow was accidental. Full stop. Anyone claiming otherwise is letting emotion drive the analysis rather than the actual evidence on film. But here's the thing that makes the intent argument almost irrelevant in this context. What intent tells you is whether a specific act was malicious. What character tells you is how someone responds when things go sideways. And the character response is the thing that actually defines how people see you. Imagine Thomas with a spotless reputation for sportsmanship. Imagine she's known as someone who competes hard but always shows respect for opponents, who helps people off the ground after collisions, who has never been accused of playing dirty in her career. In that world, the exact same elbow lands, the exact same injury happens, and what does Thomas do? She probably looks over in genuine shock. Maybe she mouths, "Are you okay?" Maybe she stays nearby while the medical staff comes over. Maybe she looks visibly upset that someone got hurt during a play she was involved in. The crowd reads that reaction, and the story becomes, "What a terrible accident, you can see how much she cares." That's not the story we got, because that's not who Thomas has built a reputation as being. Thomas has built her career on being the player people don't want to mess with, on playing right at the edge of the rulebook and sometimes over it, on establishing physical dominance as a core part of her identity on the court. That reputation isn't baseless. It's earned through years of specific choices about how to play the game and how to carry herself during competition. People who watch her regularly aren't making things up when they say she's one of the more physically aggressive players in the league. The film supports it. So when Thomas looks at Hull bleeding on the court and laughs, people don't see a nervous reaction or an awkward response to an uncomfortable situation. They see confirmation of what they already believed. They see the mask slip. They see the player who plays right up to the line, enjoying the consequences of that line playing on someone else's face. That's the psychology of reputation. Once people have decided who you are, every ambiguous moment gets interpreted through the most unflattering available lens. It's not fair in some abstract sense, but it's completely understandable as a human response to accumulated evidence. Thomas didn't get booed for the elbow. She got booed for the laugh. And she got booed for the laugh partly because her entire career had told people she was the kind of player who would laugh at exactly that moment. You can't separate the incident from the context. The context is the story. And the crybaby comment, let's not gloss over that one. Hull is on the court with a broken nose. Blood is present. Medical staff is involved. Whatever the Mercury's training staff is doing, it's clear this is a significant injury and not a minor bump. In that moment, Thomas is pointing at the crowd and calling Hull soft for reacting to a broken nose. There's a certain type of athlete who mistakes indifference to pain for toughness. Real toughness, the kind that actually commands respect, is being willing to gut through your own pain and stay competitive. It has nothing to do with mocking someone else for reacting to being injured. The crybaby comment didn't make Thomas look tough. It made her look like she'd confused callousness for strength, and that's a very different thing. Let's spend some real time on the broader implications here, because the attendance story from Phoenix is genuinely one of the most significant data points the WNBA has seen in recent history, and most people are talking about it in a surface-level way. The conventional narrative is Caitlin Clark is popular, Fever games sell out, wow, the WNBA is growing. That's all true, but it's also incomplete to the point of being almost misleading, because what happened in Phoenix wasn't about Clark. Clark wasn't there. Clark didn't play, and 17,000 people showed up anyway and created a hostile environment for the home team. What that tells you isn't just that Clark is popular. It tells you that the Fever have built a fan identity that is now self-sustaining to a significant degree. The Clark phenomenon has evolved from people want to see this specific player to people want to be part of this team and this movement. That's an enormous difference, and it has massive implications for every other franchise in the league. Think about it from a competitive standpoint. If you're a WNBA general manager or a head coach, the Fever's road attendance is now something you have to actively plan around. When Indiana comes to your city, you can expect a significant percentage of the crowd to be pulling against your team, in your building, with real energy and real volume. You're going to be playing what amounts to a road game on your own floor. That creates pressure on your players, it creates noise during crucial possessions, and it creates an atmosphere that benefits the opponent. Teams deal with passionate road fan bases in other sports. It's not unheard of, but it's genuinely unprecedented in WNBA history at this scale and this consistency. The Fever aren't just bringing a few hundred fans to away games, they're filling buildings, they're turning arenas. Now think about what that means for team building and player behavior. If your players are going to be playing in front of hostile, fever-heavy crowds regardless of where the game is, then their reputation matters in a way it never did before. There are now 17,000 potential critics in every building who will make their opinions known loudly and continuously if they see something they don't like. Players who have been getting away with physical play for years because home crowds were small and manageable are suddenly playing in front of audiences that have expectations, that have smartphones to record everything, and that have a community of millions online to share it with. Alyssa Thomas laughed at Lexi Hull's injury in front of 17,000 people who were already primed to dislike her. It went viral immediately. It became a defining moment in a narrative about her career. In a world where the Mercury are averaging 9,000 fans per game, and most of them are casual supporters, that moment probably doesn't land the same way. In the world the WNBA is becoming, where road games turn into hostile environments and every moment gets amplified, it becomes the clip everyone talks about for the rest of the season. This is the hidden dimension of the Caitlin Clark effect that doesn't get discussed enough. She hasn't just made her own team more popular. She's changed the accountability structure for the entire league. Players and teams that were operating in relative obscurity, where poor sportsmanship went mostly unnoticed because the audience was limited, are now playing in front of crowds that are paying attention and aren't going to let things slide. Some players will adapt to this. Some already have. They'll recognize that the spotlight has expanded and that they need to carry themselves differently in that bigger spotlight. Others will double down, will treat the criticism as unfair, will position themselves as victims of a culture war rather than as people whose behavior was genuinely problematic. Thomas seemed to lean toward doubling down in Phoenix, at least in the moment. Calling Hull soft, pointing at the crowd, performing for supporters who weren't actually there for her, none of that reads as someone who understood the shift happening around her. The fever-traveling fans who packed the Mercury's arena weren't just spectators. They were ambassadors for a new kind of WNBA culture. And they sent a message that night that's going to echo through the rest of the league, whether it wants to hear it or not. Let's talk about Alyssa Thomas, the player, completely separated from the politics and the crowd dynamics, because she deserves that conversation even in the middle of all of this. Thomas is genuinely exceptional. That's not a controversial statement among people who actually watch basketball closely. She's a multiple-time All-Star for a reason. Her passing ability as a forward is the kind of skill that defensive coordinators have nightmares about, because she can initiate offense from positions on the floor that most players her size never get the ball in. Her basketball IQ is genuinely elite. She reads the game 2 passes ahead in a way that makes her teammates better without necessarily showing up in the box score, in ways that casual fans notice. She doesn't need the physical edge. That's the part that's almost tragic about this narrative. Thomas is talented enough to dominate games without ever committing a questionable foul. She has enough skill to build a legacy based entirely on basketball excellence. The intimidation piece, the reputation for crossing lines, the celebrated roughness, none of that is necessary for her to be one of the great players in WNBA history. She already is one of the great players in WNBA history on pure basketball terms. But she made a choice, probably not a single conscious choice, but a series of accumulated choices over years, to make physical dominance central to her identity. To be the player people fear. To establish that playing against her comes with a physical cost. And for most of her career, that choice seemed to work. She was respected as tough. The physicality was contextualized as competitive edge rather than something more concerning. The problem with building that part of your identity is that it's fragile in a way that pure skill isn't. Skill ages gradually. You can maintain it through basketball intelligence even as athleticism fades. But a reputation built on physical intimidation requires continuous maintenance, and the maintenance costs keep going up as the audience grows and scrutiny increases. Look at the players who have managed to be physically dominant without crossing into villain territory. Breanna Stewart is as competitive and physical as anyone in the WNBA. She plays hard, she's not a pushover, she's going to give you contact on both ends of the floor. But she's managed to maintain a reputation for playing within the spirit of the game, for competing without crossing lines, for being tough without being dirty. A'ja Wilson is the same way. Dominant in the paint, physical presence, but the perception around her play is fundamentally different because her response to moments of controversy is fundamentally different. The difference isn't really about the plays themselves. It's about how you carry yourself before, during, and after difficult moments. When Stewart has a rough collision with an opponent, the response reads as regret, as someone who competes hard and sometimes things get messy. When Thomas has a rough collision with an opponent, the response reads as amusement, as someone who isn't entirely unhappy about what happened. Those are completely different signals, and they create completely different narratives. Thomas had the talent to be in the same conversation as Stewart and Wilson. Genuinely, the basketball ability is there. The accomplishments are there. What isn't there is the reputation management, the understanding that how you respond to controversial moments shapes how your entire career gets remembered. 10 years from now, what's the defining image of Alyssa Thomas's career? Is it the brilliant passing, the competitive drive, the championships she fought for with Connecticut? Or is it a video clip of her looking at a woman with a broken nose and laughing? The tragedy is that it's becoming the second one. Not because of a single bad moment, but because the single bad moment confirmed what people already believed based on years of accumulated evidence. And once a narrative reaches that level of confirmation, it's almost impossible to dislodge. The WNBA's new audience, the millions of fans who came to the sport through Clark and stayed because they found things to love beyond her, doesn't have the context that longtime fans have. They're not watching Thomas through the lens of someone who's appreciated her skill for years. They're meeting her for the first time through clips that show physical play and reactions that look like celebrating injury. That's their Thomas. And that Thomas is not going to get the benefit of the doubt from them, ever, no matter what she does going forward. That's the irreversible consequence of what happened in Phoenix. It's not the booing fades. It's the first impression she made on an enormous new audience, an impression cemented by a laugh that went viral and got replayed millions of times across every platform where people discuss the WNBA. You can't unring that bell. You can only decide what to do next. Pull back from the specific incident for a moment and look at the landscape, because Phoenix wasn't just a bad night for Alyssa Thomas. It was a preview of what the WNBA is going to look like going forward, and it raises questions that the league itself needs to answer. The WNBA is experiencing growth that nobody genuinely predicted at this scale. The viewership numbers, the attendance figures, the social media engagement, the merchandise sales, they're all moving in directions that seemed optimistic even a couple of years ago. That growth is real, and it creates genuine opportunities for the league to establish itself at a new level of cultural relevance that it's never previously achieved. But growth also creates friction. When you expand the audience, you expand the range of expectations and the range of reactions. The WNBA's existing fan base, longtime supporters who have watched the league for 20+ years, has a certain relationship with the game, a certain tolerance for its rougher edges, a certain understanding of its history and culture. New fans coming in through social media and the Clark phenomenon don't have that context. They have different expectations about what professional basketball should look like. Neither group is wrong, they just come from different places. The challenge for the league is figuring out how to serve both audiences while growing toward a sustainable future. And some of the tensions that played out in Phoenix, the crowd dynamics, the player behavior, the marketing decisions that led to 17,000 people showing up for a game the home team wasn't really prepared to handle, are symptoms of those growing pains. Take the marketing decision around Clark. The Mercury's choice to sell this game specifically around her presence was understandable from a business standpoint. She's the league's biggest draw. If she's coming to your city, you put that on the billboard. But the execution created a situation where the implicit promise to fans couldn't be kept, and the way the fallout played out, with those fans showing up anyway and taking over the building, exposed how thin the Mercury's own fan loyalty actually is. A team with a deep, passionate local fan base doesn't get its building taken over by away supporters. It just doesn't happen. When the Lakers play at home, even against the Celtics in a big game, you don't get Celtics fans dominating the atmosphere. The local loyalty is too deep. What happened in Phoenix revealed that the Mercury's fan relationship is transactional in a way that makes them vulnerable. Fans showed up when there was a star attraction. When the attraction disappeared, the people who stayed weren't Mercury fans. They were Fever fans, and Fever fans had an agenda that night. The booing of Thomas and Cunningham, the hostile atmosphere, the stolen building, these are all consequences of the Mercury not having built the kind of local loyalty that weathers these situations. And they're going to keep being vulnerable to this as long as the Fever continue to travel with this kind of support. Meanwhile, the Fever themselves face a different challenge. The movement they've built is remarkable, but movements are fragile in ways that traditional sports fan bases aren't. Traditional fans stick with teams through losing seasons, through roster turnover, through all the natural fluctuations of a sports franchise. Movement-driven fandom can dissipate if the central energy changes. If Clark gets hurt long-term, if the team goes through a prolonged losing stretch, if the novelty fades, the Fever will find out how much of their support is deep loyalty versus enthusiasm for something exciting and new. The smart play for Indiana is to use this window to build genuine organizational roots, to create local connections, community programs, and team identity elements that can persist beyond any single player's presence. To turn the movement into a franchise. Whether they're doing that successfully is a question that the next few years will answer. And then there's the question of player behavior, which is where everything started and where it ultimately returns. The WNBA has real issues with how it handles physicality. There are legitimate conversations to be had about consistency in officiating, about what constitutes a hard foul versus a flagrant one, about whether certain players get away with contact that others get called for. These aren't new complaints. They've been part of the league's discourse for years. But those structural conversations are separate from the individual choices players make about how to handle themselves when the moment is on them. The officiating didn't make Thomas laugh. The physicality of the game didn't make her call Hull a crybaby. Those were choices, made in the heat of the moment, but choices nonetheless, and they carry consequences that no league policy can reverse. What happened in Phoenix is going to happen again. Not necessarily with Thomas, not necessarily with the same teams, but the dynamic of Fever fans creating hostile environments for players who have given them reasons to react is going to recur. The league is going to have to figure out how to talk about it in a way that's honest about both the legitimate issues, harassment, death threats, stalking, the genuinely serious things that should concern everyone, and the things that are just sports. Getting booed is sports. Getting called out by a crowd for mocking an injured player is sports. Conflating those things with actual harassment does a disservice to real victims and lets players avoid accountability for behavior that deserves a response. Thomas has a choice to make, not just about one game or one incident, but about what she wants her career to mean going forward. She can dig in, lean into the villain narrative, accept that a segment of the league's growing audience is going to view her as the bad guy and play to that role. Some athletes make that work. It doesn't tend to age well, but it's a coherent choice. Or she can recognize that the landscape has shifted permanently, that the audience watching her now is orders of magnitude larger than the one that watched her 5 years ago, that her behavior has consequences at a scale it never previously did, that there's still time to change the narrative if she decides the legacy matters. The basketball ability is still there. The accomplishments are still real. The question is whether she cares enough about how she's remembered to do something different with the platform she has. Here's what we actually learned from one night in Phoenix. We learned that the Caitlin Clark effect has evolved past Caitlin Clark. The Fever are a movement now, and movements show up even when the central figure doesn't. That's both a triumph for the franchise and a warning sign for every other team in the league about the new reality of road games. We learned that the Connecticut Sun have a reputation problem that runs deeper than any single player or any single incident. When your alumni fan base boos your own players and your home crowd stays silent while opposing supporters destroy one of your stars in your building, you have a cultural issue that winning won't solve on its own. We learned that in the new WNBA, with its expanded audience and its viral clip culture, a 2-second reaction to someone else's injury can define your entire reputation with millions of new fans who are meeting you for the first time. Alyssa Thomas had years of film that longtime fans used to contextualize her. The new audience got a laugh. That's their Thomas now. And we learned that booing is sports. Boos are fans expressing their opinion about what they see. They're not harassment and they're not violence. They're the crowd's voice, and sometimes the crowd's voice is the most honest feedback a player ever receives. Thomas received honest feedback from 17,000 people in Phoenix, and what they told her was that the laugh was indefensible, that calling a bleeding opponent soft was beneath the standard they expected, and that no amount of basketball talent excuses celebrating someone else's pain. What she does with that feedback is up to her. The league is watching, the new audience is watching, and they have very long memories now. So I'll leave you with the question I asked at the beginning. Drop it in the comments because I genuinely want to know where people come down on this. Was the laugh just a nervous reaction in an uncomfortable moment? Or did it reveal something real about who Alyssa Thomas is as a competitor and as a person? Because your answer to that question says something interesting about where you think the line is between competitive toughness and something that crosses into territory sports shouldn't celebrate. The WNBA is growing in ways nobody predicted. The question now is who gets to define the culture of that growth. And nights like Phoenix suggest the answer might not be the people who have always run the league. It might be the 17,000 fans who showed up without their star player and made their presence impossible to ignore.